You recently, just last week, visited Russia, and after that trip, you were pretty open to revisiting sanctions on Russia. You told the Washington Examiner that Congress overreacted to Russia's election interference, which resulted in legislation that tied Mr. Trump's hands with mandatory sanctions. Given the Trump-Putin summit coming up, do you expect easing of sanctions against Russia anytime soon if that summit goes according to plan?
Well, I don't think those are exact quotes. What I've talked about is we always need to evaluate, are sanctions having the intended consequence? Are they working? Are they changing Putin's behavior so we can make sure we put in place effective sanctions to try and get the end result? And from a standpoint of Russian interference in our election, I've always said it's unacceptable. It's a serious problem, but it is not the greatest threat to our democracy. I think it has been blown way out of proportion. It's very difficult to affect the vote tallies, even voter files. We would know it. We have controls in place. And when I take a look as Chairman of Homeland Security, the threats facing this nation, I'm concerned about other things. That would be kind of lower on the list. But no, it's very serious. When we raise that issue with Russia, they are painfully aware of the fact that further interference is completely unacceptable and will certainly be a game changer from a standpoint of any hope of trying to improve relations, which we should try and do. I don't want Russia to slip into the enemy category. I'd rather have them be no worse than a friendly adversary. We need to find areas of cooperation.
But what are the optics when President Trump says that it will be the easiest meeting when he's actually headed to meet with allies such as the UK Prime Minister May and other NATO allies?
I know you'll have to ask the president. I'm not going to speak for him. From my standpoint, the way you deal with Russia is from a position of strength and resolve, and we have to demand behavior change before we relax sanctions, before we start working with them. But we should be exploring areas where we can cooperate with them. That'd be a good thing.
Is part of the thing we need to demand that Russia gets out of Crimea? There is a joint resolution that's been put forward. It's bipartisan with Rob Portman, a Republican from Ohio, as well as Bob Menendez from New Jersey, a Democrat, saying that we should demand they get out of Crimea. Do you support that, sir?
Well, we have been demanding. We've been demanding that they get out of eastern Ukraine, that they get out of Georgia, that they end the frozen conflict in Transnistria, that they stop supporting Iran in Syria, for example. So there's a host of areas where we've got real problems with Russia. All the political assassinations that are unsolved, the poisonings in Britain, which unfortunately have spread probably through contamination. So no, there's a host of areas where we've got a real problem with Russia. But again, they've got close to 7,000 nuclear weapons. We should be talking to them and trying to figure out some way to improve relationship over time, but only in reaction to their improved behavior.
So, Senator, we have a host of problems, as you say, with Russia. We also have some problems with China, as it turns out. We learned overnight that there's a proposal for possible sanctions, tariffs, actually, on $200 billion worth of China. You've said in the past you're disappointed that there's not more political support for free trade. Do you support this move by the trade representative to impose more sanctions?
I certainly understand that China is the biggest problem we have in terms of any country violating norms, the rules of world trade. But I think the way you get China to behave and follow the rules is with a united front in the rest of the trading world. So I'm concerned that we have not completed negotiation on NAFTA. I'm concerned that we pulled out of TPP. I'm concerned that we're engaged in trade wars with our European partners as well. I think the more effective way to actually address the main problem area, which is China, is with the united front of our other trading nations. Again, if President Trump is using this as negotiating leverage, fine. I don't want to undercut him or undermine his process here, but he needs to conclude these deals so we can move on. He's done a great job. He stopped adding to our regulatory burden. We've actually reduced it. We have a more competitive tax system. That's what's really brought greater optimism and certainty to the economy, which has had good economic effects. I'm afraid the trade war could spin out of control and be counterproductive to the progress we have made under this administration.
Senator, and let me just ask you about the Supreme Court nominee, Judge Kavanaugh. Some conservatives aren't too happy with his positions, whether on abortion and Obamacare, that he doesn't go far enough. What would you say to that as you approve of his nomination?
Highly qualified. He's going to be a judge. I mean, I love his quotes. Text matters. The text of the law is the law. A judge's role is to interpret the law, not make law, not make policy. So again, that is what I'm looking for in a Supreme Court justice, is a judge, not a super legislator. We have enough legislators, not an activist jurist. I'm looking for a judge. And by the way, that means I'm not going to like all of his decisions, because he's going to apply law that I don't particularly like, that I think is wrong. But it's my job as a legislator then to change the law I don't like, as opposed to, look for a judge to change it for me. That's what liberals, that's what progressives want to use the courts for. I want courts to remain within their Article 3 authority, interpreting, applying the law, not altering it, not making it.